So, hello everyone. Shay and I are going to be covering the most important questions that come up related to performance anxiety and also porn addiction. So, Shay specializes in helping men overcome performance anxiety in the bedroom, and I focus specifically on porn addiction, but also people struggling with porn addiction and H.O.C.D. So, if you experience either of these, you will want to watch this one. There's going to be a lot of juicy stuff here.
Yes, so we'll be doing this in two halves. The first half is going to focus on performance anxiety with your most important questions answered. Will and I have gathered the most important questions that we're asked in both of these topics. So the first half will be on performance anxiety. Second half will be on porn addiction with the most important questions asked there as well. So feel free to jump to whichever section you feel is most relevant for you personally, and you'll find in the comments below the timestamps as well, so that you're able to jump forward or backwards to whichever section you want to.
So, yeah, I think a good place to start for men experiencing performance anxiety, the question is obviously, can I be fixed?
Can I be fixed? First of all, I want to say it's normal for these questions and many others to be in our mind. But the things like, am I broken? Can I be fixed? Am I fucked? What if I can't satisfy my partner? What if they leave me because of this? What if I'm not a real man because of this? All of these types of questions are totally normal when it comes to experiencing performance anxiety. And the ultimate thing that we want to know is, can this be sorted? Can I be fixed? The danger zone we can get to with online, as I'm sure you all know for porn addiction as well, how to overcome it, there's this endless amount of information that's online that is applicable to everyone in every situation. So it can give us this danger zone of like a constant hope, like a beacon of hope. Oh, there's this other article, there's this other video, there's this other person. So like the learning part of our brain is satisfied, but then the other part of our brain that's actually thinking, hold on a minute, things are still the same in the bedroom. They've been the same for the last few months or the last few years, and I'm not actually moving forward. That part of us is not being satisfied. So the answer to the question, can I be fixed? Yes, absolutely. I know this personally from experiencing performance anxiety and overcoming it, but it took me to find the right tools and the right strategies to be able to do this. And that process actually personally took me years and a lot of money. It doesn't need to take you years and a lot of money, but it's about finding someone, I would say, that is relatable, who just gets it and has the tools and the evidence to show that they've been able to get this sorted, ideally for themselves and for other guys as well. But in summary, yes, performance anxiety absolutely can be fixed. It's about turning, I think of it as flicking a switch, basically turning the current switch is saying sex equals stress, and we want to flick the switch to sex equals calm, sex equals fun, sex equals being present with our partner. Those things, if you're watching this and experiencing performance anxiety, that may feel like a mile off or even further than that, but I promise you these things are totally possible.
100%. There's a lot of things that came up there while you were talking, but I think like one that came into my mind was the Mike Tyson quote, where it's like, I think it's Mike Tyson, where it's like everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. It's like everybody's got a plan until they're in front of their partner and they have issues getting hard, and it's like now all the pressure's on you, all the eyes are on you, and you have to actually do something. You actually have to perform, right? But I think and that kind of connects to what you're saying about like, you can do all of this education, you can do all of this learning about what's the thing you need to do. But if you don't have those strategies that are proven to get you prepared for that performance, you're just going to lose everything. And so it's really cutting through all of the bullshit to get to that.
Yeah, exactly. And also realizing, we've put so much pressure on ourselves to think that, I have to get it right. I have to be rock solid every time. It has to be the most incredible sex every time. When interestingly, a lot of the times that's not what our partner's looking for. It's an expectation we're putting on ourselves, but it's understandable when we're experiencing performance anxiety. We want this stuff sorted.
100%. So the next question I kind of have is like, people who have tried everything, right? They've done the pills, they've done the therapy, they've gone to a urologist, and nothing is actually working. Like, why is that the case?
Yes, okay, that's a good point. So let's start. I'll work through each of those individually: the pills, the therapy, the urologist, and I'll just share what I've heard from many, many guys that I've spoken with. So the doctors, this is not all doctors, but many doctors, there's not actually too much research, I would say, or assistance or support advice that has been given to them on what to do when this is mindset. My personal belief is that for performance anxiety or erection problems or ejaculation problems, let me just define that actually. When we're talking about performance anxiety, it's usually erection problems, whether that's being able to get or stay hard. It's also ejaculation problems, whether it's coming too soon or not being able to climax.
Right.
But most of that, my belief is, it's a mindset thing. It's not a medical thing. If as human beings, a significant proportion of men have this issue, because it is between, from what we see statistically, 30 to 40% of men experiencing some form of performance anxiety at points in their life, which is a lot. Even if we go conservative with 10%. I don't believe personally it's mostly medical, because we wouldn't have survived as a human race if that was the case. I believe it's mostly mindset. So when it coming back to the point of trying many things and feeling like it doesn't work, feeling like it's not working. So many guys that I speak to have gone and spoken to their doctor. That took a lot of courage for them to have that conversation, because it can feel like a sensitive topic, something we don't really want to talk about. We want to be able to fix it ourselves, especially as men. And the doctor has said something to them along the lines of, everything's fine, it's all in your head, here's some Viagra, here's a prescription for Viagra or Cialis or Tadalafil or whatever it may be. Sometimes that's even without doing any blood tests, which blows my mind. That is just an immediate, jump into that conclusion. Here's some pills, which of course doesn't solve the issue. This is plastering over the cracks. And that leads us on nicely to the second point around pills. Sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. Many of the guys that I speak with have this, it's 50-50. Sometimes when they first take it, okay, things are all right. And then it can get worse over time, or they can feel like they have less impact over time, or just they actually do not work at some times, and other times they do. And we can get into this mindset of, which I think we're going to be talking about as well in yours part, is the obsessiveness over pill taking strategies, pill taking times, quantity. I have to take it at this exact time for it to be, for everything to go to plan. If something doesn't go to plan, then everything's screwed. But the reason why, and the companies, the medical companies don't tell us this. For these pills to work, our body has to be in a relaxed, calm state when it comes to sex. Our nervous system has to be in a calm state. We have two states, right? One that we know is fight or flight. So that's when we're not in a calm state. And then the opposite is when we're in a calm state. When we're in a fight or flight state, or let's say our stress state is activated when it comes to sex, if we're feeling intense about it, if we're asking ourselves what if questions, if we're focusing on our erection or the issue that may be about to come, no pun intended there, then we are not in a calm state. So the pills are not going to work. In short, that's why they would not work. So again, it's normal. This is a normal thing. If you're experiencing that sometimes pills work, other times they don't, and you're thinking, oh my God, what is wrong with me? Even pills aren't working for me. It's okay. This is why they're not working. It's a normal thing to happen, because the pills are not the fix. It's about actually reducing the level of intensity, the anxiety, the performance anxiety that's coming up. That's what then gets the body into a calm state, which means we're able to have sex, because we're able to get and maintain an erection. And then the other thing is a urologist. So a guy who I've spoken with, some of them have gone to speak to the doctor. The doctor's then referred them to the urologist. The urologist done a blood test, and testosterone is showing within the normal range. And so there's not anything further that a urologist really is able to do at that point, because medically there's no issue.
Hmm.
And so the urologist will usually say something along the lines of, everything's fine, it's in your head, and just try to stop overthinking,
Hmm.
which their area of advice and their area of expertise is medical. Okay, so when there's a medical issue, they're the right people to be speaking with. When it's a mindset issue, they're not the right people to be speaking with. People like
Hmm.
myself or Will, dependent on what the topic is, we're you guys, because it's about mindset. It's not about something that's medical. So yeah, in summary, it's okay to feel like I've tried many things, nothing's working, but to not fall into the trap of thinking that that is a problem with you, or that your body is different to everybody else's, and that what if I can never get this right? That's not the case. It's about finding the right kind of tools and strategies, as I said, but it's about the mindset.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I think like a really important point is that like when you go to one of these specialists, like they are trained to focus on certain problems, and so like
Yeah.
they are trying to help you, but they have certain problems they need to solve. They have certain methods that they've been taught to use to solve those problems, and it's like they just can't really help you in the way that you need help, and they're not trained to kind of identify that problem, right? Again, like the extent of their training might be like, oh, it's all in your head, don't overthink it. It's like probably some of the most useless advice possible. Like, oh, don't overthink. It's like now I have to overthink about how I can stop overthinking. It's just it doesn't work, right? Um, but I guess like a question that comes up there really is about the pills. Like, should people use them? Because like I guess the reason I asked that question is because like my own beliefs about pills is like, oh no, don't touch the pills because that's going to cause
Mhm.
the problems worse. They're bad for you. They're not going to be helpful. It's just like they're always a bad thing. That's kind of like my belief coming in. Would you agree with that, or like what's your opinion on the pills?
Okay, I have two opinions, and I'll just be totally transparent with this. When I started off in this field, in this area of work, after getting it sorted for myself, and then okay, now I'm going to help other guys to get this sorted. The first few guys that I started working with, some of them were taking pills, and I thought in my mind, uh, for for this to work, for them to be have this fixed, we have to totally stop the pills and cut out the pills.
Right.
Now, that was what I thought in my head, and then I quickly learned the reality was something different to that. Uh, so I'm going to answer this question, but go into probably a few different areas, touch on a few different scenarios. If you haven't started taking pills, or you feel like I don't want to be dependent on pills, and so maybe you've been prescribed some or given some, but not really taking them, or you're not regularly taking them, don't take the pills. You don't need the pills. Okay, so avoid those if that is your situation. If you're if your situation is that you are taking the pills and you've been doing that for some time now, the very thought of just throwing out the pills all of a sudden can feel terrifying. And so, what I've realized and learned is that it's not about just throwing out the pills all of a sudden.
Mm.
It is about safely, step by step, doing the mindset shifts that need to happen so that we get to a point of indifference about the pills. So that you can see the pills there and be like, okay, actually, I don't really feel like I need it today. Or perhaps instead of having two, I'm going to have one. Or I'm even going to, instead of one, chop that in half and have half instead of one, which is at that point, I would say it's more of a placebo thing. But the
Mm.
point is that it is okay. This is not about just throwing out all of the pills and, oh my God, am I going to be dependent on pills for the rest of my life? No, you don't have to be dependent on pills for the rest of your life. But also, this is about moving forward realistically. We do not need to, like if it was a child in a swimming pool, right? We're not going to push them into the deep end for them to learn how to start swimming. That's terrifying. It would be traumatic for a child. We
Mm.
just wouldn't do that. So
Mm.
it's the same with this when it comes to the pills. It's not about I've got to get rid of everything for this to work. No, we do it at a pace that feels safe and that feels doable, with the end game of not really needing the pills anymore, but feeling okay about that, not feeling terrified about it.
Hmm. Yeah. It's
Does
really
that answer
trusting the
your
process.
question?
Yeah. It's really trusting the process and knowing that it's not going to happen overnight. Like it's not going to happen overnight. And I feel like one of the things that I've noticed in my own clients is like, there's this, they're dealing with this problem that's kind of like wrapped up in instant gratification. Like I need to watch the porn
Yes.
now, or I need to deal with this arousal now, when it's like, um, so that's the issue. But then once they start recovery, their relationship to recovery is also instant gratification, where it's like, I need to be recovered today, or else there's something wrong with me, or I'll never be recovered. Like I need to take fully on all of the things I need to take on today. And it's like, that's just still the instant gratification. Like you need to understand that it's the process of like slow changing. And that's totally fine. Like you're at the level you're at. You can like, don't be so focused on the level that you're currently at that you prevent yourself from getting to the level that you actually want to get to.
This is a really important point, and I think whether it's porn or whether it's in my case having these articles or videos or always the next thing online to be able to watch to find out more about this, or in the desperate hope for there's going to be the one thing that I haven't found yet that's going to get this all sorted in 5 minutes. How long have we been searching for that one video for? It doesn't exist. And it's
Mm,
just not how things work, or else erection problems, ejaculation problems wouldn't be a thing. Performance anxiety wouldn't be a
mm,
thing if there was a 5 minute cure for it. Just like when we go to work out, we would never expect that all of a sudden we're going to just grow muscles or a six pack or whatever overnight. It's a process to be able to get to that point. There's the one part of us that then thinks, no, I want this to be sorted as quickly as possible. And, when it comes to performance anxiety, from my side, we can get that sorted in 90 days or less. But it's about being on board with that, as opposed to the continuous temptation of, I may be able to get this sorted in the next 5 minutes if I just keep watching this information or keep finding this, because we actually stay in that place way beyond 90 days, way beyond 6 months, years sometimes.
mm, mm. One of the things that I run to in my own coaching and my own like social media presence and stuff like that is like, oftentimes when I'm identifying the problems that people are dealing with, I can sometimes come across, or I'm afraid that sometimes I come across as very judgmental, right? But it's like, I think it's true for you that like we speak from experience, having made all these mistakes ourselves. And so I guess like the question is like, can you speak to the experiences that you yourself had with performance anxiety? Like, what was your journey like?
Yes. So a lot of what we've spoken about, but ultimately asking myself, these here were the types of things that I had going through my mind. And this went on for years, by the way, that I was thinking about, what if it happens again? So whenever it came to an intimate experience, this was at a point in my life, in my, well, I would say it went on from my like early to mid 20s to late 20s, right? So a good like 5, 6 year period. I
Mm,
would be thinking anytime it came to an intimate meet, what if it happens again? What if I'm not able to get hard? Or what if I'm not able to stay hard? Or what if I ejaculate too soon? I would find ways to check and test even in the moment, my erection. Am I still hard? It feels like it's going a bit softer. Am I going to be able to carry on? Even before the moment happening, noticing these what if questions were intensely on my mind. So that was one thing that I was absolutely experiencing. Another thing was it actually happening. So losing my erection during intimate moments with people, and just feeling like, what the hell is going on? Why is this happening to me? What's wrong with
mm,
me? Why do I have this problem with my body? Then as a result of that, avoiding initiating in moments where I could have done, because I thought, what if that happens again? Then I don't want to face the embarrassment or the pain or the uncomfortability of that happening again. So I'd rather just avoid it. And then finally, also not wanting to talk to anybody about this for a long time, for a long,
Yeah.
long time. So, and then how it eventually came to me doing what I'm doing now is I had no idea the impacts that this was having in other areas of my life, spilling
Mm,
over into other areas of my life. I was totally unaware of that. Right. What
mm,
I did start to become more aware of is that I had this intense sense of frustration with myself that my life wasn't where I wanted it to be. My life wasn't on track with what I thought I was capable of. I previously, before I do what I do now, I'd had a successful career in banking, and then I decided to quit that to pursue my own work for myself. And there was just this like these why can't the overriding question was why can't I get this right? Why can't I get this
mm,
right in business, in relationships, in sex? This pressure was there, and I had no idea that it was really all stemming from this, let's say, the internal pressure I was putting on myself to perform, my expectations of my own performance or what my standards should have
mm,
been, and the fact that I wasn't meeting those standards and I was getting pissed off about that. And how it then how I then had that moment of realization is I was working with a coach, not specific to performance anxiety, but life coaching. I had a 12-month package with them, and it wasn't until month 10 that I said to them, this this situation is going on, performance anxiety, intimacy, and I don't know what to do about it. And
mm,
that was the moment when they actually took me through this exercise where I basically had to draw these three circles of how much energy, um, time, and in terms of time and effort, was I putting into my business, my personal development, and relationships. Okay, so I want you to actually imagine this, right? I had to draw three circles of how much time and energy for each one. The relationships one, I was single. The relationships one was about triple the size of
mm.
the business and the self development one. And I looked at that page and I thought, well, it's just not make sense because I'm not in a relationship. So I'm not putting any time and
Right.
energy. And then it just felt like the floor opened up from beneath me. And I had this wave of realization. I literally just burst into tears all of a sudden, where I realized,
Mm,
oh my God, all of this frustration and this, especially this massive circle in time and energy in the relationship space, is because of what's going on and the fact that I haven't got this sorted and I've ignored it for so long.
mm,
And then it was at that point that I basically made two promises to get it: one, sorted for myself, and then two, to be able to help other guys to get this sorted.
mm. That's awesome. That's awesome. And actually, like the, like when you said like that, you started crying. It's like I think that was very beautiful and that very like made me remember about my own journey where it's like I struggled with H.O.C.D for a long time, which if you don't know, it's basically for the audience is that it's basically like obsessive intrusive thoughts about your sexuality. And so like these kinds of disorders can show up with like sexuality, with your relationship, like you are constantly obsessing that you're in the wrong relationship, all sorts of different ways that we can obsess about these things, right? And I remember one time like I had this experience where I suddenly realized that I was obsessing over these feelings, um, where I interpret them as being attraction for men, and I realized that what that feeling was actually friendship, right? And I just like
Mm.
burst into tears, thinking like there's so many instances throughout my life where I had become like hyper obsessed about any sort of like positive feeling toward a man that I'd like fallen away from friendships, like friendships that should had actually died, right? And again, just burst into tears. And I think like the point that I'm trying to get to with that is to notice how there's like this belief about men and crying and the inability to really get in touch with the emotional weight of some of the problems that we deal with that prevent us from actually dealing with that problem, right? It's like
Yeah.
the being able to see like, oh my God, I'm investing so much into my relationships and I'm not even in a relationship. That emotional weight is the weight that helps you actually start changing that. But if you prevent yourself from feeling it, you're not going to be able to solve it.
It's so true. It's so true. And I
Mm.
think, the amount of guys that I speak with who will cry at some point just
Mm.
to when we start talking about what's going on, and it's
Yeah.
totally okay because it's intense. It's
Yeah.
this exactly as you said, this self pressure, this self expectation, self judgment. It's all inside. So much pressure inside with
Mm.
very limited outlets or safe spaces to be able to just let it out and be like, and
Mm.
actually share it with somebody.
Knowing that like the problem is so shameful, but that other people have dealt with the problem and they come out the other side, and the whole like messy, emotionally intense process is part of the process, and that's like fully welcome. And both of our forms are both of the problems that we deal with. Um,
Yeah. And I think, something that you will know really well is when we feel like we're alone and it's just our problem, that just
mm,
compounds the whole thing where we keep it a secret to ourselves and don't share it with anybody. It just basically puts even more intensity on the thing that we want to get away from. It
yeah.
actually keeps us stuck there because it's this feeling of only I know about it.
Hmm. Yeah.
Do you know what's
100%.
weird to me is why we do this when perhaps it's just because it's such a personal matter or cultural reasons or whatever it may be. But because when I think about other areas of life, like business, for example, if I'm looking to get a promotion, I will go and learn from people who have got the promotion. Or if I want to study a particular thing, I'll work with people who have studied that thing. Uh, but when it comes to our sex life or something to do with something to do with sex, we don't do that. Like we think we must know all the answers ourselves, but in other areas of our life, we
Yeah.
don't use that same blueprint.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And in some ways it's like I actually might change. I was going to say in some ways it's like the most important part of our lives, but I'm not too sure if I fully agree with that. But I think it is something that is extraordinarily important. Like we have so much of our biology that's based around relationships, based around sexuality, and I guess you know what that's what the word I was looking for. It's not important, but one of the most beautiful aspects of being a human being is being able to connect with somebody that you care about or love, and in that way, and knowing that like this thing is stopping you from doing that. It's stopping you from having one of the most beautiful experiences you can. Yeah. So the last question that I want to get to for you is, what should somebody do if they have porn-induced erectile dysfunction?
And this is a very nice segue into your part as well
Yeah.
now. Okay, from my side, and in terms of from what I understand, and there's obviously, will be able to credibly talk through the steps. The first step that has to happen is we have to shift our relationship with porn, right? Of course, that's the first thing, which
Mm-hmm.
will be coming on to. When leads to erection problems, so step one is we have to get to the point of realizing and understanding the relationship that we have with porn so that we're able
Mm-hmm.
to change it. I'll let Will speak about that. When it comes to the erection challenges because of porn, I don't know if it's always just because of porn. I think I see that with younger guys that it's generally because of porn. But even then, the addiction to porn is there for a reason. That doesn't just happen on itself by itself.
Mm-hmm.
There's other factors that have played a part. Yes, porn is absolutely highly addictive, but there are other factors that have played a part for us to develop some kind of addiction with that. Exactly the same with people that have, drug addiction, smartphone addiction, shopping addictions, whatever it may be. There's some kind of propensity or there's something that's happened for us to latch onto that and find some comfort in it. So that's what we have to understand, be open to going on the journey to understand for us to be able to start shifting this. The
Mm-hmm.
obvious thing that we see on so many YouTube advice videos is just stop watching porn. The reality is it's not as easy. It's not as easy as that, dependent on our
Mm-hmm.
relationship with porn, especially if we've had an intense relationship with it, whether that's the type of porn that we've watched has been more extreme or the frequency. It's not as easy to just say, okay, I'm going to stop watching porn. But then ultimately, let's assume for a moment that the guy, some guys that I work with have had, they know that they've had a less than ideal relationship with porn in the past. They don't really watch porn anymore, if at all, but they're experiencing erection challenges still. And they think that their past
Mhm.
relationship with porn has been a part of that. So let's imagine now that that's who we're focused on. Similar thing, we have to do the work to find out, even before the porn, what's the stuff that's gone on that has led to this. So I think of it like a detective. Our job is to find out what are the different pieces of the puzzle to be able to understand we've got this situation here, and this and this has led to this situation happening. So that's the first thing. And then also I think developing a new understanding of, which is something Will's going to come on to, but even when we're past this, the intensity of a porn addiction, I don't think it is just like, oh, now I don't watch porn anymore and everything's okay. I think we also have to get clear on what's the next version of ourselves, and how do I operate at that next version to be to see a sustained change rather than going back to old habits or allowing old habits to creep back in. Um, so let me just think if there's anything else that I haven't answered with that. Yeah, I think in summary, the first step would be working on, if you know that you have an intense relationship with porn, is working on getting that sorted first of all. Then with the erection challenges, it's also realizing that from a biological point of view, we have to give a bit of time for the dopamine to be able to balance back out. Because as we all know from many videos online, what porn does, it gives us supercharged levels of dopamine release that are, we're not able to match them in a one-to-one sexual scenario with somebody. But it is
Mhm.
totally possible for our body to get back to normal levels of dopamine instead of just what it has had in the past. It just takes a bit of time to be able to do that. So I think that would be the second final bit that I say is, again, it's easier said than done, but we have to give ourselves the grace of knowing that this isn't an overnight thing. And also, like the change curve that some of us are familiar with, sometimes I want to put together a curve through the when we stop watching porn, what happens, because there's times where we're not, our body does fascinating things, our brain actually does fascinating things to be able to try and get us to go back to it. And some of those things, of course, include we are not able to get hard whatsoever.
Mhm.
And it's almost like a last ditch attempt from our brain to say, well, I think you need to go back to this thing because that's the only thing that makes you hard.
Mhm.
These are the danger zones or the traps that we have to be aware of, because then we can avoid them. So even when we're, let's say, past we don't really watch porn anymore, we feel in control of it, uh, knowing, we have to also know what is our relationship with that now. Do we go back to it every so often just to check and test? Are we keeping some of those pathways alive, or actually are we able to really like evolve to this next version of ourselves? But we have to get clarity on what that is to be able to get there.
Mhm.
I know that that's a bit more of a, I would say, less clear and zoomed out perspective, but I just think it involves multiple steps if there's porn induced erection problems, and it's not just the porn.
Mhm. Yeah, 100%. Um, it's it's I've seen guys who have gone. I've never worked with somebody like this, but I know that, or I have worked with people like this. But this specific example is an extreme one. That somebody went 500 days without watching porn or even masturbating, and they try to hook up with a girl, and they couldn't get hard, and they're like, "Oh, I have to go another 500 days without porn." It's like at that point, it's not the porn, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's one of the negative consequences of the no fap movement is the fact that it's taught everyone that porn and or masturbation is the cause of all of their problems, and so anytime they have any sort of problem, they hyper fixate on the porn, and that's just not the
Yeah.
case. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's okay. I'm going to make a note of that so we can get into that. let's see if we get the chance to talk through that as well, because I think this is a really important point.
Mm.
Porn and nofap. Okay, so we are now going to move on to the second half of questions. So this is for men, if you're experiencing porn addiction, or perhaps you're not too sure whether it's, am I actually addicted or not, or I don't like the word addiction, but you know that there's some kind of intense relationship going on with porn. So exactly as we've done for the first half, we're now going to work through a set of the most important questions that come up, and Will is going to take the lead on going through these questions. Okay, so the first one is, what is the biggest mistake that people make when it comes to recovery in porn addiction, and what's a better strategy instead?
Well, actually, I think you really touched on it in the last question that I asked you, but also in what you just said. Is like people hyperfixate on the porn, right? Whether it's they think they have porn addiction and they hyperfixate on simply getting rid of the porn, or they have these problems and they're not really sure if it's associated with the porn. And so like they're hyperfixating on the porn in the sense that they think it has to be the porn for them to have a real problem, right? And so I'll try to explain what I mean by that. Is like with that guy who goes 500 days, the mistake that he's making is to think that it's merely getting rid of porn that's going to solve all of his problems, right? And so like all of their energies get wrapped up in just like getting the longer streak or doing more, or simply removing this thing from their lives, right? And you have to understand that like you can remove porn altogether but still have so many of the issues that were associated with the porn. Because one of the cliches that we talk about in addiction recovery is that it's not why the addiction, it's why the pain. We are addicted because we felt this pain, and then we used this porn that made us feel better. And so over time, like we haven't made any connection there yet, but just over time, we learn that every time I feel bad, well, at least I have this thing to make myself feel better. And then that creates an increasingly, just because of the nature of porn and how addictive it can be, that creates a compulsive relationship with it, where anytime we feel bad, we have to use porn. And then we use porn so often that starts causing us problems. And so if we feel bad, we use porn, we feel bad, so we have to use the porn, right? It's like the porn is just like the thing that we've become hooked on. But the problem is all of the pain that we're not solving in a proper way, in a healthy way of dealing with all of the problems that we have. I always say, like, you relapse to porn because you're people pleasing, or you relapse to porn because you're a jerk and you're alienating your relationships. Those are the reasons that you're addicted to porn. It's not the porn, it's how you're operating in your life. So you have to obviously try to quit porn and like learn about the specifics of porn itself, but be more focused on the fact that you're not dealing with pain in the proper way. And so when it comes to a better strategy, that's kind of the first part of it, is understanding that it's not why the addiction, it's why the pain. But secondly, that addiction is the narrowing focus of what we can find enjoyable or meaningful, right? And that's the kind of the cliche that people use, but I think it's kind of like missing the point a little bit, because often enough, we know what we find enjoyable, we know what we find meaningful. The issue is that we can't put in the effort to actually do those things we know we should enjoy. So for a specific example of that is like, I love metal music. I've always wanted to learn the guitar. I've always wanted to become a really good guitarist. I knew that that's something that I would absolutely love doing. It's just I couldn't put in the effort to actually do that. And so you can see how like the two cliches, it's not why the addiction, it's why the pain, and the narrowing focus of what we can find enjoyable are related, because putting in the effort to do those things is painful. It's like we've learned that we cannot put in the amount of effort it takes to get good at those things or to develop our skills in those things. So we try to put in a little bit of effort. That effort is painful. So what do? We go to the porn, right? So we kind of get trapped in this, this cage where the only way we can deal with painful situations is with porn. And we have so little ability to put in effort into things that the only thing we can do for enjoyment is porn. So really, just to kind of summarize what I've said then, is that we need to deal with pain in better ways, and we need to start cultivating the ability to put in effort to those things that we know we enjoy. Or if you don't know what you enjoy, you don't know what's meaningful, figuring out those things and then trying to put in the long-term effort to become good enough at them that they can become enjoyable.
One of the things that came to my mind when you were talking through that is, do we get into this trap of the where you were saying there about learning to play the guitar, right? There's
Mm,
effort that's required with that, and it's over a long term. It takes a period of time. When it comes to porn, there is obviously it's low effort, and there's
mhm.
instant reward from it.
Yeah.
And so, does the effort thing? Are we born with that? Of like, oh, I find it difficult to achieve this playing the guitar or doing the thing, whatever the thing may be. And we're just focused on the quick hits, or actually does, from years and years of watching porn and training our mind in that, do we train our minds to be in that way of like low effort, high quick reward versus
Mm,
a longer effort lifetime reward? But we don't really think about that stuff because we've got something right here and now in front of us.
mhm, mhm. So I think it's a bit of a both and, in the sense that like um, we are born with the ability to learn how much effort we have to put into to get the thing that we actually want, right? So in like a traditional setting where it's like you have to actually go out and do things to get sex. I don't like that language, but you know what I mean. Is like to get sex, you have to like be successful. You have to be like a high quality man that women would actually want to be with. You have to be able to talk to the women and like be interesting to talk to, right? Depending on the culture and the time, etc. But point being, it just takes effort to be able to do that thing. So we learn over the course of our lives that this is the amount of effort I have to put in to get this reward. And so we're just able to do that. But in our modern culture, we have made life so easy that from the day we're born, we just have so many basic things that are so easily or given to us so easily that we never learn throughout our lives to put in effort, right? And so, like when it comes to something like pornography, um,
Mm.
yeah, it's just like I didn't have any blockers on my computers growing up. I would naturally just like search up, boobies or something like that in Google Images. I'd come across it and slowly find my way to Pornhub or Reddit or whatever the case may be to start looking at this stuff, right? And so again, I'm not too sure if I'm answering your question anymore, but like point being is that it's the fact that we have so many things just easily handed to us that we just never learn to put in that effort, right? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. And I think, exactly as you were saying there, in this modern world, we have everything is almost on the surface perceived to be instantly accessible. So
Mm,
here's the app to find your dream partner. Here's the thing to watch. Here's the platform to
right.
watch any kind of porn you want and get an instant release. Here's the course in 2 weeks that's going to show you how to make 100K in the next month.
Hmm.
But the reality is, no, there may be some exceptions of somebody that does manage to, on the first few chats, find their life partner, or the one person that, had some things lined up in their life where that 100K in the first month became possible. But for 99.9% of the population, it's not how it works. And I think what struck me as you were explaining that is we can train our mind to become worse at putting in effort by constantly chasing these low effort, quick, fast
Mm,
reward.
hmm.
We just become less and less used to what it actually means to put in effort to do
Hmm.
something, and therefore it becomes harder to do it over time because it's more unfamiliar.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. 100%. It's the, I think what's pervasive in our culture is the fact that um, we view raw pleasure as the only way to kind of measure happiness, right? That stimulation. If I'm very stimulated by like drugs or sex or music or like experiences, like that stimulation itself is like the highest form of happiness, right? And so when it comes to something like porn, I often get the question like, why would I quit porn when it's so much better than any sex I could have, right? And I think like baked into that is the assumption that like the raw sensory stimulation, the raw stimulation of that is higher than sex, therefore it's better than sex, right? And I think like in most cases, it's at the very least easier to get more raw sensory stimulation from porn than sex. It's not always more, but it's definitely easier to get it. Um, but again, there are just higher levels of fulfillment and satisfaction and enjoyment that you get from sex that porn can
Right.
never provide. And so that's part of the issue, is that it's not merely, and this is what you're saying, is that it's not merely that these things are so easy to get. It's that like the lowest form of them are so easier to get. It's like the lowest form of sex and intimacy is porn, and that's very easy to get. The lowest form of good food is like the high sugar, high salt, high fat, and that's very easy to get. Right, like as far as I
Mm,
understand, like healthy foods are more expensive than unhealthy foods. The fantasy of getting $100,000 in a few weeks, that fantasy is easier to get than actually getting the $100,000. And so we get
yes.
wrapped up in
Yes.
these like false versions, or not even false, but just like lowest form of these things, thinking that that's the real thing, to the point that we get deluded about the fact that that is the real thing, and then wonder why do I feel so bad when I'm watching all of this porn? Why do I feel so
Mm.
bad when I'm eating all this food? It's just because like the lowest form is the easiest to get. There's something else that I wanted to say there as well. Um, yeah, it was just I guess to wrap up, I have a video called "Is Porn Better Than Sex?" I believe, that goes into like the hierarchy of needs, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that
Yeah.
talks about how like the physiological needs are like the raw sensory stimulation, that's the lowest form, and then there are higher needs that are fulfilled by real sex. And you have to understand
Mm.
that it's like there are higher needs that are harder to get to, but even though they may not be raw sensory stimulation higher, the full gamut of fulfillment and meaning that you get from those things is better than the most high stimulation activity.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's very powerful to just see the lowest form is the easiest
Yeah.
to get, and that is applicable to, well, every area of life. I would imagine. I haven't mapped it out, but I would
Yeah.
imagine in pretty much every area of life that would be applicable to. Okay, all right. So you mentioned H.O.C.D, and
Hmm.
let's move on to a question around that. So, what is H.O.C.D, and how does it relate to porn?
Yeah. So HOCD is basically, like I said before, it's like an obsessive intrusive thought disorder around your sexuality. So someone like this, they have always been straight. They've had crushes on girls their entire lives, are perfectly fine. And then almost out of nowhere, they suddenly have these obsessive thoughts. Okay. So, um, for example, they might be walking through a grocery store. There's somebody bent over. They look over and check them out and think, oh, wow, that's a really nice ass. Then the person stands up and it's a man, right? And that one experience can kind of like break up their mind almost, where suddenly they're thinking like, why did I think his ass was good? Does that mean I'm gay? Have I always been gay? They start obsessing about their past, like thinking like, oh, that one thing my mom said when I was like 12 years old, that was her hinting that she knew I was gay all along. And then it's like it's completely diluted, and the issue is that you're fully aware of how diluted it actually is. And that's what makes it so
Yeah.
difficult, is that you think that if somebody's like diluted, they're not aware of the fact that they're diluted. But with HOCD, you know full well the entire time that it's ridiculous. Like when I started having
Yeah.
HOCD, and still do, think it's totally fine to be gay. I have no issues with gay marriage. I have no issues with anything like that. I'm very lucky enough to have a family that would accept me if I was gay, right? Like I have gay friends who don't have that luxury. And it's like, I had no reason to be afraid that I was gay. And yet I was terrified and constantly thinking, to the point that I'd be walking down the hallway at university. I would see an attractive man and I'd have to like go back to my room, skip class, and like be in the fetal position on my bed, obsessing about the fact that I was gay, right? And so this is how like HOC, how bad it can get. It's not just like, oh, you have a few thoughts here and there. It's that the circle that represents all the energy you're putting into figuring out your sexuality is vastly bigger than every other circle. Um, and so that's HOCD, and how that relates to porn. is kind of like what you had said before about how there's kind of like these underlying issues that are leading to the performance anxiety and are leading to other issues in your life. There are these underlying issues that are leading to the H.O.C.D, that are leading to the porn addiction, where if you are somebody who's dealing with a lot of shame or guilt, a lot of the men that I've worked with have a lot of issues feeling masculine enough. They're very like concerned about like, am I being masculine? Do people think I'm masculine? Am I walking very in a very feminine way? Am I talking a very feminine way? These are all issues that they may have had throughout their lives that contribute to H.O.C.D emerging, right? Like it's very unlikely that you'll have somebody who's very comfortable with being feminine or anything like this have H.O.C.D. It's often coming from a place of insecurity about being masculine enough. And porn is something that, like, again, if you're feeling all this anxiety or all this pain, all of this self-doubt, and you learn to treat that with porn, that can be associated with the kind of thinking that H.O.C.D emerges out of, if that makes sense. And then porn, of course, when you all are already kind of putting on these hypersexualized goggles and like seeing the world of like, where can I, to put it in a vulgar way, where can I get my next nut? It just makes sense that you'd be thinking about that constantly, and men would kind of get wrapped up in that, right? Especially when you consider a lot of the people I work with who have H.O.C.D have already been watching porn with transgender women, right? Some of them even escalate to watching transgender women to then watching gay porn. And it's like, again,
Yeah.
always been attracted to women, always been, started watching porn with straight porn. And then it slowly escalated to the point where they can only start watching gay porn. They get rid of porn from their lives and all of that attraction goes away, right? So it's not like a sexuality thing. It's an addiction thing, just to be clear. And so again, like I think I answered the question. I hope I made all those connections made sense. But do you think I need to summarize that, or is that clear?
I think so, like a couple of questions that came to my mind.
Yeah.
So, why does that happen? The
Mm.
Is it just chasing the dopamine hit? But why is it like? Do we go from straight porn in that scenario that you just gave, straight porn to trans porn to gay porn, and the
Yeah.
whole time this like for the guys that this is applicable to, where they're heterosexual or they identify as heterosexual, that this is crippling for, because it's like I'm having to watch one thing to get off, but actually
Yeah.
I don't, this isn't what I want. Like, why does that happen
Mm. Yeah.
from
So
your
I think
understanding?
that, yeah, for sure. It is, I think that I guess the first thing that I want to say is just like an additional point is the fact that sometimes they don't stop with gay porn and sometimes they can go to something more extreme, whether it's like
Yeah.
BDSM, whether it's stuff involving children, unfortunately, or even animals, right? So it can get more extreme.
Yeah.
So it's not even that that's the end point. And the reason that that happens is, um, in a simplified way, that we basically just get bored with what we're currently watching, and then we need to go to
Mm.
something newer, something more, not even more shocking at first, just something more new and specific to be excited again, right? So for example, you might be like just watching normal straight porn, it's just a guy and a girl, could be any guy and a girl, doesn't matter. That eventually gets more boring, and then you have to be a little bit more specific, right? Like maybe it's a certain hair color or a certain race or a certain situation or position or something like that, where it's like, oh, this is the new thing. And then you get bored of that, so you may shift to a different race or a different hair color or a different situation, and it's all within like the category of like normal straight porn. But then over time,
Mm.
all of that stuff just gets more boring, and you have to go to that stuff that's a little bit more shocking, right? So maybe you'll go to incest porn, or maybe you'll start watching transgender, where it's like you may not even be focusing on the fact that she has a penis. You're focused on the rest of her female looking body and ignoring the penis. It's just the knowledge that she has that is what's exciting, right? So you can have women who are fully clothed, but you know that they're transgender. And then over time, it's the being as female as possible, meaning that it's a trans woman giving a guy a blowjob, or it's a trans woman who is receiving, and then it turns into the guy receiving, and then now you're the guy in the position of receiving, and the next step is obviously gay porn, right? And so, point being is that we in like It's from like complexity science, but point being is that it's called the adjacent possible, where what is the next possible step that's just adjacent to where you currently are that you could get to until that becomes boring, and then you get to another step and then another step. And so you can see how somebody can be like normal for them, and then through step by step by step to just like what is possible step more extreme, they eventually get into something that completely defies their sexuality. When we look at the full range of what they get to, it just seems so crazy. But we have to remember that it's a long-term little step to this more extreme content. And like when I say boring, like you talk about dopamine, a lot of people talk about dopamine. That dopamine is kind of dealing with the motivational aspect of it or the expectation. Like some people talk about it, the predictive processing model of dopamine, where it's like you're predicting something is going to happen. And when that prediction is violated, there's an increase in dopamine. And so you experience that is very motivating, right? It's like you're on the savannah, you're looking for some food, you come across this like berry bush where you're like, oh, I didn't expect to find this berry bush. This is very unexpected. So there's a lot of dopamine. Now I'm going to be more likely to remember to find this berry bush in the future, right? So it's all about like your
Yeah.
ability to predict what's happening, right? So yeah,
Mm-mm. Okay. What did you call it?
possible, adjacent possible, yeah.
Adjacent possible. Okay. I'm going to come back to that in a second. One of the
Yeah.
thing that came to mind from like some of the guys that I've spoken with, where there's definite traits of this. And I think
Mm-hmm.
maybe, well, I don't know. I mean, as you were talking it through there, I definitely noticed some aspects of it in myself throughout my life as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that as with anything, there's a spectrum of this of like we experience it to an intense crippling amount. And then for others, we have, just a few things here and there. But one thing that comes up often is what's wrong with me. And with some of the guys that I've been working with, we've gone back before erection problems, and it's been this continuous thing to always have something wrong with them.
Mm-hmm.
That before was nothing to do with sex; it could be a medical thing, and it's been in different. So I'm thinking about. Let me give one guy as a specific example. Started off with what was going wrong in the business, then what was going wrong in the relationship, then it moved on to his body. And there was this, he had a problem with his back or had a problem with this part of the body, and then it moved on to the erections. And what we got to the root of is like what felt uncomfortable to him is, who am I without a problem? Who am I without
Mm-hmm.
something being wrong in my life? And I just wondered if that is tied up with the H.O.C.D of like how much of it then becomes an identity of this is who I believe I am. And so we do whatever, famous line from Tony Robbins, we do whatever it takes to remain consistent with who we believe we are. So we create these identities for ourselves. Uh, yeah. And then there's also this like creating an identity for ourselves, but then there's also the science / medical part to it that, I'm aware of. We can't just write off, or it's not really H.O.C.D. It's because you're creating an identity for yourself. I'm conscious of not wanting to do that as well.
Yeah.
But I think my question is, well, it was just a reflection, really, that I think I see
Yeah.
parts of that coming up with the guys that I speak with too.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the coolest ideas I've ever come across is called positive disintegration, which is basically, to sum it up, is that like human flourishing is becoming satisfied with your constant dissatisfaction about yourself and your current situation. Because if you say like I want to improve myself in any way, it's because you're dissatisfied with that. And often what happens with some mental illnesses, like I don't want to speak in absolute terms, but what often happens is that we feel this dissatisfaction and we become dissatisfied with the dissatisfaction. And then that spirals out of control until we're always trying to find a problem and we never know really how to deal with it. Right. And so it's the solution there is not to get rid of the dissatisfaction, because again, that's one of the drivers of improvement. If we improve on any
Mm-hmm.
metric, it's because we're dissatisfied with what it currently is. But becoming satisfied with that dissatisfaction is basically saying we're at peace with that. And so like in my coaching, I talk about the pain-based identity and the virtue-based identity, where and I kind of regret calling it the pain-based identity for this reason, because like people think that what I mean by that is any sort of emotional pain. And so moving to a virtue-based identity where you're defining yourself based on like your values, your aspirations, your strengths, that means no pain whatsoever. But in reality, it's you're still feeling some pain sometimes. It's just you know how to kind of channel that or transform that into evolving toward your aspirations, right? And
Yeah, I
so
love.
for to kind of like connect that with what you're saying before is that like the issue when we become hyper fixated and defining ourselves based on our problems, it's because we don't know how to channel those problems into solutions in a healthy way. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Yeah, it does. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's fascinating, and I think it is. It moves us on nicely to the next question related to this: is
Mm-hmm.
addiction beliefs. So, what are
Yeah.
addiction beliefs, and how do they interact with our aspirations of for ourselves?
Mm-hmm. So, an addiction belief is basically any belief that you have that keeps you trapped in addiction. Okay, and the issue here is that it could be a belief that you hold very dearly that may not even necessarily need to change as much as you think it does, right? So, specific example, when I'm working with Christian men, I often run into the issue where, so okay, first of all, in our culture, I think that we have this idea that men and women can't be real friends, right? That like there's always going to be this kind of like underlying desire or assumption that something could happen, that I want to have sex with her, or what if she develops feelings, etc., right? So there's no true friendship. um, and then that ties in with Christian beliefs, let's say, where a Christian man wants to be virtuous, right? Like he wants to be faithful to his partner. He doesn't want to violate somebody else's relationship. And so that's phenomenal. That's fantastic. I think that's beautiful. But you notice how that belief can kind of get hijacked, where if you are dealing with something like a sex addiction, and you've conditioned your mind to be constantly sexualizing things and constantly objectifying things, you only view women as a sexual option. And so, why would I violate my Christian values by becoming friends with women when it's violating those values of faithfulness and fidelity? Does that make sense? And so, the
Yeah.
virtuous Christian value is being hijacked by the constant sexualization of women to continue sexualizing women. The problem is not uh, being friends with women. The fact is that you can't stop sexualizing women, right? And so again, you have a positive belief, you have a belief about sexualizing women, and that hijacks your values to keep you trapped in this constant sexualization. Um, and so this is kind of
Mm.
how we need to be able to deal with, again, the pain-based identity, all of the ways that we cause unnecessary pain for ourselves through watching porn, through being a people pleaser or anything like that. We have to heal that and make peace with it, and then start defining ourselves based on our aspirations, what we actually want, right? So this is learning that we don't always have to view women as sexual opportunities. That's not something we always have to do. We have to make peace with our sexuality, but we need to start defining ourselves based on what we actually want out of our relationships with women. Okay, if I want to be faithful to my wife, I shouldn't just like bracket off this entire half of the human population. I should learn to actually deal with women in a way that's respectful to my values and to my partner. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it really does make sense. And I think it's when we notice if we have these barriers in our life or there's this stuckness, that it's time, that they are signals that it's time to do the work and speak to somebody to explore this. Nobody teaches us
Mm.
this shit, right? In schools, parents, whatever, because most people
Yeah,
just, we haven't really got there yet as a human
yeah,
race. But you
yeah.
can see here, and if you're watching this, and I was fascinated when Will was just sharing that, is like, this is fundamental. It's transformational in terms of if we are doing things, living in line with our beliefs, that's actually holding us back from achieving or evolving to a higher level that we want to be
Mm.
at and that we know we're capable of being at. We have to do the work to explore what may be going on in our mind to be able to then break through that barrier and get to the next point that we want to. And then even beyond that, there's going to be another point that we want to evolve to as well. A bit. So you gave an example there of the sex addiction. What would be an example of an addiction belief when it comes to porn? Could you share an example of what an addiction belief might be when it comes to porn?
Yeah.
And then also similar how you did for the sex addiction one, but how that addiction belief around porn could interact with our aspirations.
Yeah. So I think like first of all, like sex and porn, I think people make a distinction between them, but I think that they're essentially the same thing. It's more just like, do
Okay.
you have the money to be able to get escorts, or like the credit to get escorts? Do you have the ability to find partners? Like you're charismatic enough, or if you're not, well then you would just like settle with porn, right? And so another addiction belief that you might have is something like, oh, can I become more charismatic? If you don't believe you can become
Right.
charismatic, you may believe that it's like, oh, well, if I'm, if I don't have like the right jawbone, if like I have prey eyes, I think they call them like prey eyes or like that. I have prey eyes, point being. If you have these like hyper fixating on your features, they're not like the absolute pinnacle of attractiveness. I can never get a partner. I may as well just settle with the porn, right? And so it's essentially, it's not just like sexualized beliefs necessarily. Like I guess that's like attractiveness, so it's related to relationships, but it's just noticing how the beliefs you have about what you're actually capable of in life, what aspirations you can actually make a reality, can keep you trapped in porn. Because again, if I can't achieve my goals, well then I'll settle for the next best thing, which is often porn. Or if I can't go to university, right? If I'm not smart enough to engage myself, or I'm not disciplined, well then I'll just settle for a career that's not really in alignment with my passions. And if I'm not really aligned with my passions, that's going to have an effect on my mental health, which is going to be associated with porn addiction, because the only thing I can do to feel good is to watch porn, right? So
Yeah.
it's noticing how being able to connect with your aspirations, being able to connect with the actual life that you want to live, and then seeing what blocks or limiting beliefs you might have that are preventing you from even believing you could live that or make it a reality.
This is fascinating. So it's not the addiction belief specific to porn or the addiction belief specific to sex. It's the addiction belief specific to who I believe I am, or the story that I'm making up around my current life.
Exactly.
And that is the very thing that's keeping me trapped in the addiction cycle.
Yeah. Yeah. Because again, like remember what I said at the start, is that the biggest mistake people make is hyperfixating on the porn, or hyperfixating on the sex or the sexualization. It's like all of those things are
Okay.
important, but there's so many other problems we might have. Like one of the things that I really try to make clear to my clients is like, recovery is step one. Like I'm working with you on step one almost of living an amazing life. That like once you get the porn thing handled, which doesn't even necessarily mean removing the porn yet, it just means like you have a consistent habit of going to like the mental health gym, like meditation. Very simple. If you meditate every day, even though you still might relapse every once in a while, it's like now you need to drop the obsessions about quitting porn and start actually living the life you want to live. And ironically, that's going to get you away from the porn. It's not by hyper fixating on quitting porn. If your compass only points away from porn, you inevitably lead yourself back into porn. You have to have a compass that actually points somewhere else.
Yeah, thank you, Will, for
Mm.
explaining this, because this is just a level of depth that a lot of the 5 minute fix videos don't get to.
Yeah.
This is very interesting for me to hear, and I hope for the same for the guys watching this. For me, it's just been a whole realization there of
Mm.
exactly what you meant by not hyper fixating on the porn. And I guess it's a similar thing with the performance anxiety as well. One of the first things in the early stage of working with the guys is, okay, let's stop obsessing over the fact that something may be wrong with us. So we go through to show them that there's nothing biologically wrong with the body, so that we were able to
Mm.
stop the fixation. But it's similar in terms of we're pointing all of our energy over here at the moment and wanting the result that's over there. And we actually have to be able to pivot and focus on,
Yeah.
okay, that we've been putting our energy into the wrong place. And that's okay, because we didn't have the right tools or knowledge to know how to move things over here.
Mm-hmm.
Um, That was really helpful. Okay.
Yeah.
And the final question I have then is, for now guys that have overcome a porn addiction, so let's say there was an intense porn addiction in the past, that overcame that, what would you say of how we stay on track of taking our life and moving forward in the life in the direction that we want to, versus not allowing it to slowly creep back in, or slowly going back to old habits whilst pretending or thinking in our mind, I'm in control of this, I don't really watch it, or I don't watch it how I used to anymore, so it's okay, I can go and look at it from time to time.
I think in that situation, honestly, I would send a guy to you. You know what I mean? It's like you are dealing with people who have performance anxiety, where it's like it's a problem outside of porn, right? It's like the reason that you said this before, like one of the reasons that people continue to watch porn is like they're not even watching it because they want to watch it. It's to test, see if I can get an erection or something like this. It's like I can clear the way to help somebody deal with the porn problem. But like I said, that's step one. And so it's like if you, whatever reasons you may have for wanting to go back to porn, it's because you're still hyper fixating on the porn problem, and you need to start developing yourself beyond that. So if you've figured out the porn thing and you're having performance anxiety, find somebody who can help you with performance anxiety. Help you find somebody who can help you really get the most out of your real sexual experiences with real life partners. Like
Mm.
I don't spend a lot of my coaching talking about um, actually having fulfilling sex with your partner. Like we touch on it a little bit, but it's like, again, I think that you could really help guys there develop that really helpful, healthy relationship with their sexuality. So that even though the raw sensory stimulation is never going to be as amazing as the most extreme porn you watched, you can still have far more fulfilling and meaningful sex. And you eventually get to the point where you can get some pretty intense raw sensory stimulation experiences with sex, obviously.
Yeah. Um, so I'll give my example still on this question,
Yeah.
because I think may help to bring it to life a bit. I noticed, so after I went through the journey of, porn was also an issue for me in the past,
Mhm.
in terms of I going back to, I'd never realized it from the perspective of these addiction beliefs. Now I see from what you've just explained that that's what it
Yeah.
was. So thank you for that. That was a
Mhm.
free coaching session for me there.
Yeah.
I I definitely noticed that for a period of time afterwards, every so often, let's say like it was every, I don't know, 2 or 3 months, something like that, I would go back and just have another like a watch of some of the stuff that I like, a
Mm.
particular scene or something that I remembered that I liked, and I wanted to just go back and watch it. And I remember at that time there was this question in my mind of like, am I kidding myself that I've actually got this sorted? Uh,
Mm.
yes, I'm not watching it anywhere near the same frequency, and I remember the shift in the feeling of this doesn't have a hold on me anymore, and that's such an
Mhm.
amazing feeling. But then also the part of me that was questioning, but if I'm going back to this every so often, even though it's at a much lower frequency, have I did I really have it sorted as much as I thought I did?
Mm.
Like, these were some of the questions that I noticed in my mind.
So yeah, it's like another example of what you're talking about might be like, okay, I've been taken to a very extreme place in my taste, and so I'll go back after so many months and test to see if I can still get hard to that stuff, or I'm still attracted to that stuff. Um, and again, like this is just part of the pain-based identity. It's trying to
Mm-hmm.
define yourself by merely the absence of all the problems that you had. It's
Mm-hmm.
perfectly normal and natural to want to do that, right? Like again, like I don't want to make it seem like you should never judge success based on the absence of problems, but when that's your only strategy, you get caught up in the problem, right? And so like at that point, like a lot of people ask me like, um, when do I know that I'm no longer addicted, or when do I know, like how many days until I can say I'm fully recovered and things like that. It's like you're trying to define yourself based on like an absolute destination, where it's like what does your life actually look like in terms of the things you want your life full of, right? So for you, like when you're talking about, oh, do I really have this problem under control, it's like I would say, yeah, probably. you have the problem under control. It's just the thing that I would work on is learning to be more focused on the things you actually want your life to be full of, right? So like you have to remember to engage in real life, right? Like another example might be, I have this problem under control. I've learned to like reintegrate my sexuality and to view my sexuality as something to love rather than to be afraid of. Oh, I can watch porn every once in a while. I can watch porn once a month or something, and that's totally fine. But the thing that I would challenge there is just like, is that preventing you from engaging in real life, from having those real experiences with real people? If it's not contributing to that, I would say that like you need to question it and
Yeah.
likely take the thing out of your life. Because I think, again, whether or not you can truly be recovered or you can ever be free of addiction all the time, the fact of the matter is that those connections are always going to be there. And even if you have it fully under control where you're not going back to it, it's very easy for you to get wrapped up back into it and get taken away again, right? Like we know this from addiction recovery, where somebody can be alcohol free for decades or heroin
Yeah.
free for decades, and then one thing happens, they make the wrong decision, and it takes months for them to get themselves back out again, right? So you just have to understand that
Yes.
like you have to let go of this thing. And it's not like you have like how do I phrase that? It's like you have to understand that you're not losing something by getting rid of the porn. You are opening the door to so much more to gain when you engage in real life. And so the one important belief that I really think people need to integrate very deeply is that the removal of porn from your life is not a loss. It is a gain.
Amen to that. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So as we bring this to a close, if you'd like to just share any closing thoughts and two things specifically, what we've spoken about a lot here. So what is the one piece, if guys watching this were to have one piece of advice to take away specific to your area of porn addiction, what would that piece of advice be? And also for the guys that want to find out more about what you do, where can they find you?
Yeah. So I think the most important piece of advice, and I kind of had this reaffirmed today, where like there was a bit of a not a conflict, I would say, in like the chat group with my friends, but like there was a lot of things being said and a lot of like resentments that weren't being addressed were uncovered, right? And this like literally happened in the few hours before we met today. And the thing that I noticed in the entire thing is that even though people were talking about things that were like, oh, I'm resentful about this thing and I should have said it so long ago, but I'm saying it now, it's like the response to that was just like, thank you so much for letting me know about that. Like, I had no idea that I was doing this. I had no idea that you felt this way. Thank you so much. And so the point in talking about that story is just to say, your group of friends are one of the most important things you will ever have in your life. And you need to be sure that that group of friends are going to support you in your growth, right? And so
Mhm.
the thing I would say is that when you're looking for friends or when you're talking to friends, don't expect them to be perfect. Don't expect them to be amazing people. Just be looking at, are these people growing and do they want to grow in their lives? Because I can look back at the same group of friends 10 years ago and be like, wow, we were really toxic back then. But even back then, we were on this path of self development to becoming better people. Where today, again, even though we're not perfect, I was like very overcome by how much I love and really appreciate the fact that I held on to these friends the past 10 years, even though we were all, myself included, toxic 10 years ago, right? So I think that's really important. And like the thing that I would add to that only is that if you are not in that situation, if you find yourself where you don't have those friends or you have to leave friends behind, the best thing you can do is to find somebody that can help you create that, right? And so in my coaching, probably in your coaching as well, I have things that are made to be able to find those people and to set yourself up, like getting beliefs, getting like your anxieties handled, so that you can find those people who are growing, because you're going to find other people who are growing if you yourself are growing, right? So get help on that path. Don't waste time. Don't waste uh, taking in all of this information, trying to find the stuff that you need. Like get the help so that you can get there, because that group of friends is going to be very important. So where people can find me, My YouTube channel is Porn Coach Will. You spell porn with a 0 instead of an O, just for like the algorithm safety, I guess. And you can also find me on TikTok, same name, or you can just reach me at will@willcameron.org. That's my email. And so now I put the same question back to you.
Okay, so I think in the number one thing I would say to take away for guys that are experiencing performance anxiety, as I said, whether it's erection or ejaculation challenges, to know that you're not broken. It is absolutely possible to get this fixed, that most of this is a mindset thing. It is not a medical thing. It's still important, by the way, to go to the doctors, get blood checks done to make sure that there's nothing medical going on. That's always step one. But most of the time it's not. It's not medical most of the time. So it's to know that and to tap into this part of you that does believe, no matter how long this has been going on for, that does believe you can get this sorted, that you can start to have kind of intimacy and sex and passion and connection with your partner or with a future partner that you know is possible. There's a part of you that does believe that because you're here watching this video. And I'd like you to tap into that part and to use that as strength to be able to have an uncomfortable conversation with somebody, whether that's me or with someone else, to be able to start getting the tools to be able to get this done. There is help and support out there to get this sorted, but it's really important to know, A, it can be sorted, and B, that you're not alone. You do not have to go through it alone, and actually being okay with the fact that that doesn't really work. You know, we can try and do this for ourselves, and in most scenarios, well, I think in all life scenarios, we have to, if we want to grow, we have to learn from someone generally who's been there, whether it's business, whether it's even learning how to swim, right? We have to learn riding a bike. We have to learn from a teacher, somebody that has got it, they've gone through it themselves. And then finally, in terms of where to find me, so yeah, YouTube is the best place. So it's my name, but YouTube, Shay Doran, same for my website, shay-doran.com. But for both Will and I will put the links in the description below. So if you want to navigate to either of those places, in the comments section below, you'll see the links to be able to get straight there.
Cool. So yeah, thank you so much for watching, and thank you so much, Shay. I really appreciate this conversation.
Thank you. Yeah, I've loved it, and I have no doubt that for the guys watching this, if you're here with us till the end, you've done an amazing job as well. I hope this has also been fascinating for you too. Thank you for your time.